reflect on the subject of gender, the notion of a binary gender, male or female, is extremely Western. And how do you say? As if presenting itself in a very patriarchal way, as if it's absolute, that there always has been either male or female. You're either one or the other. And that's had a lot to do with organization, social organization, and knowing who belongs to who, and labeling, and creating the situation where people are forced to believe in the label which they get. Also that the Western civilized culture is absolute, that this is how it is. This is the reality. There is male and there is female. And when you look into indigenous cultures, like Native American culture, for example, there are 5 genders, not 2. There's male-male, there is male-female, there is male-female total blend, female-male, female-female. It is a spectrum officially, and the ones who are totally in the center tend to be the priests and the psychics. They have a particular position, and they're noted for their very awake intelligence. So you can see ancient pictures from 100 years ago from Native American tribes of transvestites, like a man who is a wife with a dress and a beard, who's there with the children. There's much more fluidity there in naturalness, and it's the same in other cultures. It's not absolute that it has to be this fixated man in suit, woman in dress form.
This in the meditation the first time. All the males are new.
Yes.
Some have more femininity than others.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And often when the male body is very much incarnating the female aspect, manifesting the female aspect, you get something of incredible beauty. And when the female is really moving into her male aspect, you get something of incredible beauty. When a man is fully embodying, like a gentleman, his female qualities, he becomes Christ-like. There's something incredibly beautiful. There's a strength and a gentleness, and this blend of all the spectrum of quality starts to come through. And the same when a female is really free in her masculine side, in her male side. So it's a bit of a paradox that a lot of women are here to manifest the male, and men are here to manifest the female. Because we're not just living on the surface dimension of form. We are multidimensional. And all the qualities, all the range of the spectrum in every quality is available to us in any moment, regardless of this layer of form. So a principle of how we work is that what's essential is the most powerful, like life or essence or love. And this manifests through the physical in the way it creates the physical. And this is quite a difference from how we're conditioned. But this is one of the bases of spiritual psychology, the healing principle, that you can move something, shift something with the energy, and it affects the physical. The inside, the subtle dimension, is incredibly powerful in affecting the physical dimension. It's not the other way around, that how we look determines how we are in our essence, which is the way we're conditioned to believe. You know, if we're in a female body, that conditions our essence. So our essence is essentially female. You know, if we're ugly on the outside, then we must have an ugly soul. Right? We are conditioned to think like this, which is a little bit ridiculous when you look at it, because also the physical is changing all the time. You know, there would be no beauty in old age. Anything wavering from the ideal, and nothing physically is ever ideal, would be good enough. And so there is a particular software of suffering where we identify the outside and say that controls what's there on the inside. And when we move with gender like this, we begin to unravel that, to challenge that condition. And it's a huge principle, isn't it? You know, if my freedom depends on the conditions of the world, then what is my freedom? You know, it depends on me being in an open field, surrounded by people that like me and let me do whatever I want, skipping around and maybe able to fly. You know, it doesn't work like that. Your freedom is here unconditionally to the conditions. Meaning, even if you're in prison, you're free. Even if you're in any kind of form, you're free. Even if you're old and tired in the body, you can still fly with the spirit. And that's maybe why we need this physical dimension, partly to liberate the spiritual essence in this way. Because there is this other law of healing, which is that when something is denied in the physical, something's closed down, a possibility is closed down, then it comes alive in a deeper dimension. For example, when we lose our sense of sight and we can't see so good anymore, the inner sense of sight can come very much alive now. So a lot of healers, Bob Moore included, along their process, along their way, had disturbances to vision. And because of the disturbances to vision, that they were threatened with blindness. The inner sight developed, and they began to see energy. They began to see frequencies, even with eyes open and with eyes closed, because of that disturbance. And it makes sense, doesn't it? We might experience poverty in order to appreciate wealth, right? If we're rich all the time, then we become like impoverished in our wealth. So when we actually experience the beauty of an olive, that you get to eat an olive, how much appreciation then is born for the richness within one single olive. When our outer hearing is deafened, we often open up an audio ability, a clairaudient ability. We listen more deeply on the inside. We become more vibrationally aware. We become aware through the physical of the sense of vibration. Even if we can't hear with our ears, there is this, from a subtle dimension, this awakening that happens.
Is there also a connection between forgetting all the facts? I forget a lot.
Yes.
Yeah. What's happening there?
So if you lose your grip of what you know here, then a deeper kind of knowing can appear from behind that, and that can be a spiritual knowing, which can be such a relief. Because it moves with from a quality layer of knowing, experiencing a deep kind of wisdom in a way starts to come to life. Whereas the other kind of knowing can be connected with fear and security, and I need to know where I am in order to be safe, to control. You can't control things unless you think you know them. So when all of that is lost, there is a much deeper rest possible in what is a naturalness of knowing. So the Native Americans, when they talk about gender, they talk about two spirits and one heart. And of course, the spirits are always in a blend, but so the polarity is there partly in the spiritual, it's there in the physical, but the heart will blend everything, and the physical will attune to that spirit and heart. And that's incredibly wise in a way, compared to our Roman Empire, census orientated, either or attitude towards our fundamental identity. It's a division of labor. It's quite pragmatic, the male-female. It's a form of social control. So when we're not able to be a male as a female, the essence of the male comes very much forward from the subtle dimension. Because it's barred in the physical, the qualities show up very strongly, which is why it can be a little bit of a hedgehog when we say female is this and male is that, because it could easily be the other way around. You follow? When we're not able to physically take the form of a male, energetically something of the male awakens very, very strongly, because it's barred on the outside. In the same way that the outer sight is a barred and the inner sight awakens, the inner male awakens. And in some ways, if you look inside yourself, you might find you know much more about males than you do about females, from that dimension of knowing, because we studied them for a whole lifetime as the other. Right? We have so much to say about males as women. Much less to say about females. And often when we try and talk about females, it's through the eyes of the male, which is a whole loop-the-loop. Isn't it? Sorry, I thought you were laughing. And it would be so much easier and so much less fear-based and so much less projecting if we could just allow the male aspect to be alive in our hearts. And by itself, the female aspect then is allowed to. Or whatever is there in the moment. So it's the same in this so-called male world. It's all about the female object. If not the ideal woman or the ideal, wife, then about the non-ideal mother, because they all had mothers. And when men are on the big stage, the presidential stage, who are they performing for? Who are they trying to impress? Who do they want to love them? Love me, love me, love me, love me, love me. Tell me I'm okay. Tell me I'm a success. Tell me I'm a winner and not a loser. Who are they trying to get that from? It's a great big female audience. So the so-called male world is kind of dancing in a matriarchy in a way. Deluded because it thinks it's in control. And so there is this mystery that's happening in the meeting position between male and female, which is an energy force which is so very, very alive, very powerful, can create universes. We talked about it yesterday. Bart talked about it yesterday. And we can call that sexuality, this meeting position. But sexuality is not only that. It's wherever the male comes forward, there is already a meeting position with the female. Wherever the female comes forward, there is already a meeting position with a male. And this meeting position is the essence of this sexual. You feel a kind of manifestation of the sexual potency there. In that, when whatever form of life, there's a vitalization. There's a creative capacity, really from a field of infinite possibility, there's a creative capacity. We look at how the mind works. We have an idea, we match it against another idea, we match it against the world. It's all about meeting positions, meeting positions, meeting positions. Then we witness it. So we create and we receive. And then we see that it's good. Or we junk it in order to receive another one or to create another one. It's these creative moments, very, 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 very alive. And that's from the mind, but when it's from the heart, it's almost like a force moving through us. Such a power of attraction, of love here, connected with the male-female polarity or with creation, with that meeting position. So within an individual atom, you see a splitting between the male and female poles. Within a planet, you see a splitting between the male and female poles. Within a magnet, the splitting between the male and female poles. Everything created has this polarity. when you go to the feeling dimension of the heart and you look at the creation of the whole universe, what you've got is a kind of unified energy, one. You wouldn't even say it's male or female. There is this oneness. And then creation begins to step up. It could be a push, it could be a pull, it could be a need, which is a kind of pull. It could be a movement of compassion. Who knows what's that first twinge which sets the ball rolling into this dimension, the manifest dimension. But it starts it begins creation. And you have this division. And one of the first divisions is between the seer and the seen. There is consciousness, we're in the heart. And there is a kind of happening, and we become self-conscious. We become aware that we're aware. There is a consciousness of being here, right? And maybe an incredible sweet stillness, something extremely beautiful, no problem yet. But the split happened, and the ball is rolling into creation. At a certain moment, this consciousness becomes two. And let's call it the male and the female, because they're both the child of this oneness. And there is a kind of agony in the splitting away. There's a sense of isolation, a sense of having been rudely awoken, a little bit like when you're a child and you get waken up too early. That feeling of like, ugh, like, or when you get woken up to be born. Like, this horrible not wanting to wake up feeling. And it's a kind of torture in a way. In the heart, it feels like a torture. Oh, let me sleep. And there's a shock in it as well, because to split what was one into two, there is a kind of agony in it as well. And it's conscious. Both sides are conscious. And let's say this is the male and this is the female. So now they're conscious and they awaken in this new dimension in a field of pain. And each one looks at the other and says, you cause this pain. This pain came with you. So the male looks at the female aspect and says, this horror of isolation and abandonment and rude awakening is because of you, because that's what I see with this feeling. And the female looks at the male and says, it's because of you, abuser. So there's this rift created of pure suffering of separation. Isn't there? Otherness, the other. It's like this one has denied this one the unity which was there, the deep rest which was there. It's almost a birth of blame and maybe shame. Because it's also receiving the accusation as well as giving it. A kind of field of hatred in a way. And this is before there were any females or males born physical human. There is a suspicion, an association. But then, a few light years go by. I'm making stuff up, but just to make it a bit cosmic. A few billion years go by. And they're still looking at each other. And then it begins to be a falling in love, because this one recognizes itself in this one. So it's this kind of fresh miracle of creation. The male looks at the female and it's alive, but it's also himself. And it's different, but it's one. And this incredible force of love starts to move through the oneness, through the separation towards the female and backwards. So this field of love opens up, which begins to create a reunion. And then again a splitting. And then we begin to make babies. It begins to descend into the physical. If you're going to talk, we have to unmute you. Yes, so that they can hear. Wait a second. Let's do it right. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. I love your metaphor. Can oneness experience itself according to your experience?
It is doing.
And it's doing that through polarity.
Yes.
So the polarity is needed for a different point of experience oneness in itself, because
Exactly.
if it's just oneness, it's
Exactly.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And the other question would be, can oneness be at peace without experiencing itself?
Well, that's an interesting question.
Or is it?
Yeah, because I don't know.
Yeah, that's something to ponder. It's kind of connected to where we're going.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Thank you.
For our purposes, because we are in the dualistic world manifesting through polarity, we must have it and. You know, we are oneness experiencing itself, and oneness is free of duality as well. You know, life is created into separate forms, and life is life, both. And that gives us a little bit of an advantage over the angels, because they don't get to experience duality in such a kind of close-up way.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. There's a need for the human experience. It's like the finest, the end of the tree branches can touch parts of the air and the wind, which deep down in the bottom of the tree, it can't reach. And the experience of being divided many times. But it's still part of the oneness of the tree. There's different metaphors we can apply to it. Yeah. So when we take this whole confabulation to the heart dimension of the oneness, which is always here, the oneness of the heart, and then the movement into polarity, and the incredible love which is there of the universe of our heart towards the universe of our heart on the outside, of the inner towards the outer, or the inner towards the deeper inner, falling in love truly with the kind of source of all the universe, which is inside ourselves. So this field of love which is there. And then this field of pain and rupture. We begin to get an idea of how this gender thing translates into the field of experience. So let me give an example. Now we bring it really to the ground. Husband and wife, binary, hetero, having a relationship, having a marriage. Within the whole shrinkage that happens within the history of pain between male and female in the human form, are in the kitchen. Like nothing, over the kitchen sink can break open suddenly such a field of hatred, isolation, abandonment, enmity. That means to be the enemy each one of the other, like the other is the demon, Satan incarnate. Like nothing, because we can fall into that rift of the heart. And often it happens more likely when somebody's very close to you. Like really inside the domestic home, living, intimately sharing the toilet and everything. It's much more likely to happen than with, random males and females out there. Because there is a relaxation of the heart into this area of familiarity. But then what often can happen within the marriage is that the husband is holding the wife responsible for crimes which are beyond what any mortal person can be responsible for. She is the one that screwed the whole universe. Or the sons towards the mother, it can be this. And vice versa. The husband is the ultimate abuser. He's the abuser of abusers. And he's the greatest criminal with an extra bit that he's deceiving and pretending not to be. He snuck his way in. And the amount of rage that can come forward, and it's rage from the pelvic, but it moves forward into the heart with an incredible sense of hatred. So it's almost like a spiritual archetypal hatred coming into a little human context where this, Norman could never be responsible for like the wars of the gods and goddesses. Or Frida, she didn't birth the whole universe, but it's coming down on the human psychology, and that's partly why divorce courts can be so very extreme and so cutthroat and so endless. because there's a mismatch in dimensions. And it doesn't have to be extreme. We can meet it in every relationship. And when you're working with people, you'll meet it in couples therapy and you'll meet it in singles therapy within relationships, that they meet this place of like utter alienation. It's not just that the partner is other, the partner is monstrous. Such a violation. And all of this is the associated feelings in the gap between male and female, which we carry as light beings in a way, or dark beings, as spiritual beings. We carry this rupture. And the human psychology doesn't really know what to do with it. So we try and plaster on it. We try and plaster it up. No, you shouldn't hate your husband. He's a nice guy. And look how sweet he is. And he provides, whatever. At least he's not an alcoholic. Like your
When he's
father.
an alcoholic, at least he's not betraying you. When he's an alcoholic and betraying you, at least he brings most of his money home.
At least he doesn't violate the children.
Yes, exactly.
He's not violent. He didn't hit you. Or the other way around. To try and make this, so what we do internally, and we don't need other people to tell us that, we do it ourselves. We try and make ourselves love our husbands and wives, or our partner. We try and force love. And then we cover, you look so sad. And we cover up the hatred. We kind of put a kind of like a plaster over the hatred which is there, to try and make it good. Now, when you're working with people and with ourselves, because we're people too, remember that pathway, because behind this association of hatred and demonification and pain of separation and loss and abandonment, behind this is this most incredible love. And if we hit the hatred and we bypass out into a pretend love, the relationship contracts, it shrinks. We shrink, our universe shrinks. We always kind of pretend, forcing it in a way. But if we can relax in that field of hatred and not even make it personal, it's possible to intimately hate somebody without it being personal. Meaning this is that archetypal male-female horror coming forward. It's not really about Shmulik or Frederick. Flattering him. Norman, Peter, your husband. It's about the gods and the goddess. It's that rift. It's not about your brother here on earth. It's about something much more archetypal. Then it's possible to have this gentleness towards the suffering of hatred. We can feel a compassion towards that suffering which we experience in the heart. We can change our attitude towards it in such a way that we're no longer trying to deny it or repress it or disown our own heart. It no longer stops us going into our heart, but actually we can have mercy of it. This is quite a suffering that I have here right now. It's actually nothing to do with Peter or John or Frida. And then it's possible, little by little, to wait until that essential love begins to awaken, the real thing, by itself. Because why shouldn't it? It's the most natural thing in the world. There's no forcing needed. The essence of each and every form is incredibly beautiful. We lose the essential connection partly because we don't let ourselves feel the aversion. We don't let ourselves feel the pain of the rupture between male and female. As if we could have just the love and none of the separation or abandonment or loss, which is part of it.
So somehow this is the urge of the universe to heal this.
It's part of creation. It's the suffering is part of the catalysis as well. Because it doesn't let us be. We can try and pretend love and all of this, but it's going to explode sooner or later because the real love wants to be free in the physical. And it includes that, it doesn't exclude it. Once we've got that pathway where the actual love is allowed to be there, in whatever vibration it is, it might not be the absolute love we have for Frederick, but there is love moving through us and as humans. When it's allowed to be there, then everything turns around again in a way. We move out of the devil's territory of female, male projections, domestic slavery, gender wars, abuse, and all of this, back to our own center, where instantly there's a true value, to be a value again in the relationship. Things begin to make sense again because they feel right. This love can't be taken away. It's deeper than the hatred. Even if they reject this love is still there. You know, even if the neighbor says this love is rubbish, the neighbors can say what they want. So this is part of the interplay that happens here in the field of the heart. And of course, the heart, when it's expanded, is including the whole body and the physical intimacy of sexuality, which is there in the meeting position. So here we come into that law again about the manifest and the unmanifest, what we said about seeing and the inner sight, or hearing and the inner hearing. So also in sexuality, the same principle applies. Because if, as Bart explained and showed yesterday, that sexuality is the same as being alive, then we should all be fucking all the time, according to the conditioning. Or we should all be desired all the time. Or we should all be horny, just like that. And if we don't feel horniness, there's something wrong with us.
Or if you feel it, there's something.
Or if you feel it, there's something wrong with you. Each one with a gender archetype. The nymphomaniac, you know. That's like the devil's wife on legs, isn't it? If a woman who, yes, even if she's good looking, but if she's not good looking, if she's our age, sorry, my age, our age. That wasn't personal. It was just because you were making eye contact. But you see the archetype of the horror of female sexuality. So it's not really allowed to be at all, is it? Even physically, but also it's not allowed to not be. Because there's a power struggle going on all the time. And then male sexuality, I think I'd rather be female. In terms of like the performance anxiety and the amount of dissociation and fear that happens intimacy in the male psychology. It's crushing. You know, women can just lie back and think of England. The man has to deliver something of it. Sorry.
You're getting very personal now.
Yeah.
My mother and my father, now let's get really personal. In the early divorce wars at the beginning when I was little, I just know the story from my mother at a young age. But anyway, they were fighting and everything, and the neighbors heard. And my mother went out to the garden, and she was weeping in the garden. And there was a fence, and the neighbor was clipping roses on the other side of the fence. And the neighbor says to my mother, "Are you all right, dear?" And my mother says, "Yes, my marriage is not going well." And she said, "I think it's best to think of next day's recipe." And my mother is like, you know, like the 60s, right? So she was a little bit evolved. Like, oh. So she went back and told my father. They laughed about it and they were happy again for a few weeks. Next day's recipe. Yeah. Yes. But there's the assumption that it's like a one-way street where the woman delivers and the man has to perform. And this is horrible for every side of every spectrum. There's no freedom in it at all. It's all obliged. It's all forcing. It's all pretending. It's all If not for each other, then for the world or for the self-image. You should have sex twice a week or else. Or once a week before winding up the clock. Otherwise, your wife will leave you. And impotence. Like who dares say that word? You can say clitoris these days, but impotence. There's Viagra ads everywhere. At least I get loads. But can feel the horror in it and how it creates itself, this performance anxiety within the male. And of course, that's got a female counterpart. It's like it goes into the place where people stop communicating. There is such a field of trauma there. And it's generational trauma again and again, cancelled out, cancelled out, cancelled out. And it's all based on this belief that sexuality is a doing, is a performing. And this is very deep. So most females, and maybe it's true of males as well, but I didn't ask, but most females that I've asked, when they begin to make love, immediately dissociate. They start to make love and suddenly they're like gone out of the body. Yeah, or not even, or witnessing it from somewhere else or just far away. And it takes time to actually arrive back in the body. But often it's over by then. Because there's trauma involved. There's trauma involved with sexuality. And there's also trauma involved around trauma, because if we dissociate, then that's not okay. You should stay in your body, right? You see the forcing which is there again? Rather than just being curious about the movement, letting it be all-inclusive. Because it's a dimension shift. Doesn't mean that the body has to close down if we can allow the vulnerability which is there. Or allow it to close down and open up in its own time. Men also often dissociate. They go into their minds. They're with the wife, but there's a pornographic movie going on in order to perform and to keep control, so as not to fall down that abyss of the fail male, the male that fails. So we need this love. We need the space of this love, the authenticity of the being of what's real in the here and now. We need communication, not just between ourselves, but also inside ourselves. This attitude of permission, of gentleness, of respect towards what is being felt in any moment. And most of all, we need to shift how we view sexuality itself. So sexuality isn't some kind of voodoo that we all pretend we understand, but none of us have a clue what it is. It really is a sensory capacity. It's a sense like the sense of sight, or the sense of love, or the sense of truth, or the sense of peace, or the sense of touch. It's a sense. Meaning it's an open experiential element. It's something through which we experience a dimension of aliveness in an intimate uniqueness. And unconditionally to the form. So I remember once I was being used as a model as a 16-year-old for people to do sculptures in an art fair. And there was this little boy, 6-year-old boy, and he was doing the clay version of my head. And the way he was touching the clay was so sensuous. It was like opening the heart, but in a dimension of physicality, there was a tenderness and a connection, and the way he was relating to me, it was the most incredible sensual experience. Stroke sexual. Because what's sexual if not sensual? And he was a child. And I'm looking at him and thinking, maybe he was my husband in a past life, or like, well, like what? But he's this little. But it was like he was a full man in that moment. In the way he was moving, the way he was relating, he was so much in a oneness, a wholeness in a way. Another time, I remember being in a supermarket, looking at the baked beans, and comes this incredibly yummy male energy next to me. incredible softness and absolutely resonating with the essence. It was like, whoa, who is this? And I look, and it's this 90-year-old man. 90 years old. Like, but from his essence, I was like 30 or something. His essence was so utterly yummy. And he stood there and we looked at the baked beans, and then his wife came. It's hack! And that was that. But I'll never forget it. There is something going on which is so alive when we awaken to it, which has no pressure, no obligation, no forcing, very free, very experiential. And when we're working with people, of course, we not only overtly will they share their sexual things sometimes because they need so much to communicate. There's really a need to be able to talk about stuff, but also their field will be shared. So we don't want to kind of split it off because of fear, because of condition. And there's no need. There's really no need. We are born with a very, very deep distrust of sexuality, in the sense that we blame it for the hatred, the aversion, the cruelty, the humiliation, the bullying, the trauma, the power games, the lynchings. We blame the sexuality for it. Where there's been an abuse of power, we blame the sexuality. When there's been a violation of boundaries, a disrespect, where there's been no consent, we blame the sexuality. In so many different ways. Oh, it's because he's a man. Boys will be boys. Oh, it's because she's so pretty. It's how she dressed. Well, she was horny. You see, we've been deeply coded to take this divine quality, which is the meeting position between male and female, which is everywhere, which is part of the power source of our physical incarnation, to take this and to make this the criminal. The thing from which we are conceived, from which we are born, through which the cells multiply, through which the stars explode, we demonize. We blame. And in this, we cut off one of the deepest healing resources that we have. Because sexuality is a movement through all the dimensions, the physical, the emotional, the heart, the mental, of purification, through bliss, through pleasure, goodness, through need, through the rhythms of the whole. It attunes, it harmonizes. There's so much healing happening through the field of sexuality. It's an incredible healing agent. But again, we sigh because we think, okay, sexuality is not there for me. It's not there in its freedom. And again, we come into this place where sexuality is a thing and it's an overt experience. But is that what it is? Is sexuality about the doing, or is it even about the feeling? Is it a sensation? Or is a sensation an effect of something much, much, much deeper that we totally blindsided ourselves to? So why is there abstinence in a lot of mystical cultures? Why do they not have sex? Partly because when you don't have sex outwardly, there is, like with the blindness and the deafness and the male and the female, when you don't express it outwardly, there is an awakening of the more subtle dimension. Something of its essence comes home, is allowed to be. And maybe its essence has nothing to do with getting somewhere, doing something, performance, having a particular experience. Maybe its essence is much more powerful and amazing than that. Maybe when sexuality moves through the circulation, it brings you back to this place of stillness, deep rest, peace, unconditional being, singularity, just being what you are, existing in unconditional grace. So this is clearly part of sexuality. And sexuality, where is it coming from? So we're conditioned to think, like if you're a good heterosexual female, sexuality is coming from a man. Or if you're a good heterosexual male, that sexuality is coming because you see a sexy woman. It's not true. It's not coming from there. She might not even be aware of him. You see how much we deflect responsibility from how much we lose ourselves. Sexuality is coming from somewhere deep inside ourselves. Behind all the layers of experience. Very deep inside our bases. And there's a place where there is absolute rest and space and freedom and continuity. We don't disappear there. But this is where sexuality is coming from. So it's part of the sexual dimension. There's no doing involved. There's no acting involved. There's no achievement. There's no winning. There's no losing. There's no rejection. It just is an alive source of life. Of pure creativity and destruction. Whatever, that manifestation. Oneness. There's no gender. There just is an existential, unconditional, eternal, spacious basis of you, alive. Even if you're not physically alive. And one way to access this, to get a sense of this, is to imagine a dark space in the pelvic area. And somewhere there is a stirring that starts to happen, like in the bases of the universe, the open, infinite bases of the universe. There is this stirring that starts to happen. This stirring could lead to anything. It could lead to painting a picture. It could lead to getting up and walking into nature. It could lead to making love. It could lead to just being happy to sit. But there is a stirring happening in the darkness. And already here, it's very worthwhile to be. It's a field of infinite possibility, from which all universes are born, is alive, as you, in the basis. The words disappear a little bit. You could also say it's about manifestation. Creativity. But there's a very particular vibration, and it's in the bases. It's including everything. Where it will come to is where it will come to. One of the forms is to make love to another human being, but that's not the only form. In a way, it's a stirring momentum that allows the blend, which allows love, which allows the meeting positions, the dance. So it could be stirring, and you could meet a ray of light, and it begins to stir through the ray of light, and the ray of light stirs through it. It's like a mixer. And experiences are born. But it's extremely, in a way, it's more personal than the person. It's very, very alive as part of the basis of ourselves. There is an intimacy, unconditional intimacy. Absolutely. It's like every quality of true nature has its unmanifest source, and sexuality the same. So what happens when we have to think of sexuality as an action? It means the whole area of rest and peace and space and inaction is not allowed, which means we lose consent. We're no longer allowed to say no. It's no longer okay to not be sexually active or to not have sexual feelings. So a forcing starts up to deliver a particular kind of, now it's an intimate form, into our human experience. And this is quite a tragedy, because the deepest layers of sexuality, we could be having sex every day and it wouldn't touch the deeper layers of sexuality. We could be ice skating it for a lifetime. The deeper layers of sexuality, the deeper magic, can only be allowed when we release the clinging to the outer form. That means if a couple are not having sex, everything could be beginning to happen at a deeper dimension, which is so different from going to couples therapy, let's fix our sex life. You see, so that it looks good from the outside in. It means when we experience absolutely no horniness, there's probably something happening in contacting a deeper dimension, deeper than the conscious experience, where something more essential is becoming conscious, is purifying, is coming, being allowed to be. The inner sexual sense, let's call it. And this all changes everything quite a lot, doesn't it? From the way we are trained into thinking about sexuality. Yes. Yeah. When you look at it as a quality. Now, when working with people, with other qualities, for example, where do we find love is in crisis and form? Is when there is hatred, like that couple that are fighting. They can flip. Once this contraction of hatred is able to move, they can return to love again like nothing sometimes. And they go, love, hate, love, hate. It's part of the dance. But sexuality is the same. So inside a lot of sexual trauma is the quality of sexuality as a healing potential locked. Which is, you understand? So if we were raped, for example, there was a horniness in the rape. So part of the sexual energy is locked within the memory of the rape. So this sexual energy as a healing aspect is wanting to come back to life within the whole field of sexuality. The sexuality in us is wanting to meet the sexuality trapped within the memory. This is very unconventional, what I'm saying, but so very important. So the healing factor would be in allowing the sexual energy of the rape. Because then it will heal the whole experience. It won't make it go away, but it acknowledges it, and the flow can return back to the source, and then the horniness goes out of the rape situation. It's not trapped there anymore. You know, so many people with the Epstein scandal, I don't know if you know about the Epstein scandal in America of child abuse. There's so many male clients from California right now are having pedophile nightmares, that they are pedophiles. They look at a child, they immediately have a sexual association, and they freak out. And they come to therapy for that. Just because the association in the collective field was awakened between sexuality and children and shame when it's not allowed, and it's the worst thing possible.
Talking about horniness in a way, but can it be the idol of the people? I mean, I think when you're being raped, there can be horniness as well, but also not. Yeah. But by the guy. Yeah. Mostly the guy. Yeah. Yeah. Do you see how important it is to realize that in the field of horniness there is always horniness and not horniness? We can be having the most passionate sex, and there's part of ourselves which is totally not horny. Mm-hmm. And there is something which is horny. Mm-hmm. So in a rape situation, there is a meeting position. And there is always horniness. And it's experienced maybe as the horniness of the rapist. The one who is raped experiences the horniness of the rapist. But she experienced that with her sexual sense. You see? And it's a vile kind of horniness. And it's maybe the last kind of horniness she wants to experience. Like you don't want to look at the rotting corpse and you can't unsee it. So you can't unfeel it. But when it's allowed to be there, when there's this attitude of permission and gentleness and spaciousness and not trying to take it away or to punish, then there is a softness where there's an acknowledgement of what happened in its horror, like with the hatred. Now it's with the field of abuse. And the sexual energy can be free again. It does a kind of magic. Because it has a field around it of sexual abuse.
So the sexuality there is a quality, and there is abuse, domination, violation, cruelty, desperation, loneliness, forcing. Exactly, all of that. So it really needs a lot of space to allow everything to be itself. But if we blame the sexuality, then we, in a way, we deny the healing agent, which is within the trauma. Exactly. Then we might as well shut down the whole sexual sense. And then we really are damaged by the rape. We close down the pelvic. And then because the pelvic's closed down and the sexual sense is closed down, we don't actually have an awareness of rapists in the area. You follow? Very, this is not something we can broadcast publicly. It's too wide, because it's only certain people that can follow this. It's so important. It doesn't mean that it's anybody's fault at all when they get raped, but it means the pathway towards healing. We're learning it. The deeper pathway towards healing. And in a way, we are all collectively raped. We're all collectively forced. We're all collectively humiliated, men and women. The field of collective trauma and sexuality is immense. We're like kindergartens, hardly daring to step into our bodies.
And kind of the new thing is not making it possible to unite again. It's like more.
Sometimes both. Everything is there.
Polarized.
Yeah. It can be polarizing because, but it also awakens the communication. So people begin to acknowledge and to feel it's okay to speak about places where they were abused, which they didn't even admit to themselves that they were abused. And men go through a layer of guilt and shame often, and horror and feeling accused. But then something awakens about the whole issue of consent. And maybe it's not okay just because my dad and my brother and all of my friends in the Donald Trump's toilet says it's okay. Maybe it's not okay. You don't take it for granted that there is immediately a counterpart just to be the man. The thing about performance anxiety in the male aspect is that it's incredibly narcissistic. So the woman has to accept him. So it's all about him from the beginning. So often he can go completely over the female borders because he's all the time worried about his own performance. And it's like, she doesn't exist. What she might actually like, maybe she doesn't even want to have sex. And he's already like this.
In a place where it's created, the place created.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a kind of hell.
But I think because the woman reacts also out of protection, like lubrication and all that stuff,
Yes.
Not a physical reaction.
Yeah.
There's a manifestation or benefit often both sides.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think this is also problematic to heal, because often you might, when you heal sexual trauma, you don't heal the people in what you're talking about. You just make the charge on the image you take away, but we don't heal the people there how to really come to connection with their own sexuality.
Yeah, but it's quite important not to blame the conversation in such a way that the conversation stops. The Me Too movement is just the beginning of a conversation. The polarization happens, which means each side has space to kind of feel their side of the polarity of the trauma and to feel the other side. So it's not that the conversation was wrong, it's the conversation is just beginning. It needs to continue. Exactly.
And, everybody wants to kill the form.
Of course, because
but it's very needed sometimes.
Yeah.
Duality.
Exactly. Yes.
It's important to understand when you're raped, the rapist is literally inside you, alive. The energy, the atmosphere of the rape. You're betrayed by your body because your body became horny, but it's part of you. It became part of you. And also the one who is raped is part of you. And the healing is not in dividing them or getting rid of the rapist. It doesn't work. It's already part of you. This experience has been there. And you 200% experience the rapist physical, his energy, maybe his foulness, his disconnecting, his whatever was there. But it's part. And this experience is alive on the background. So what is important is to bring both together, the victim and the perpetrator. This is when we are able to move beyond it and kind of come back to our own power. And if you say power or sexuality, it doesn't make a difference. We come back. The healing is in the meeting position. This is where the magic starts, where the magic is. Where it comes together again. Something is split and it needs to come together again. So the same split which is there between male and female is the split which is between the victim and the rapist. It's exactly the same split. It's the same rage, the same anger, the same pain, the same isolation, the same loneliness. It's exactly the same. There is no difference. And I'm not talking about outer wholeness, I'm talking about inner wholeness. And that's difficult work. That's very difficult to go with somebody who has been raped to such a depth that this is allowed to come together. But that's where the healing is.
I think, unfortunately, I don't say everybody, but in conventional healthcare, often the victim part is here instead of and the identity is this one, the other one is this. So this is the same one.
You never get free.
So part of this is really in this simple idea that sexuality is a doing and that sexuality is a thing, which means it can be damaged, which means it can be lost, which means that nobody is safe. It's always dangerous.
Mm.
And when we begin to understand that sexuality is a divine quality, which we're moving through us, which is both male and female, which can never get lost, which can never really be abused. There can be abuse and there can be sexuality. Sexuality is so much deeper. Abuse belongs to the world of boys with their toys and wars and outer experience in a way. Yes. Because the energy of what he describes as the energy of rape is the energy of abuse. So when a woman has been physically, sexually abused like this, she might energetically be raping men in return. Abuse can move back in many ways, like Yannicka said about her father, that they made him drunk to see what he would do.
It's rape.
This is also happening when older girls gossip together about a man's dick and laugh at his acne. The man is literally being burnt like a witch.
Yeah.
It's their worst nightmare that this will happen because they know it happens. So the energetic rape for them is constantly terrorizing. But all the women will laugh at him because his flies are undone. It's like soul rape in a way. Or in the old days when a man's wife betrayed him and he was a cuckold. This was like the ultimate defeat of everything that he stood for. It was like a fate worse than death. That's why they would put their women in mental hospitals rather than admit that it was a thing. The fear of females are so strong. So in the understanding of sexuality, that it's a quality and it's a sensory quality, it's a sexual sense. And in following it backwards, so it's no longer about activity or about doing, we begin to follow it back towards quite an amazing physical, creative power source, which we never lose at any age, which is always accessible in any gender, which is an incredible support towards our children and towards our fellow people. So much in the area of, the last thing I'll say, and then it's enough, but so much in the area of sexual trauma is still, we treat it on the secondary layer, not the actual trauma where the person was violated, where there was abuse, where there was power, where there was domination, where there was forcing without consent. So much of it is in that second wave. where there is shame, where there is a condemnation, where they are told their sexuality is now damaged, where they feel damaged. The classical Victorian, she lost her virginity. She was deflowered by the rascal. So she's no good to get married anymore, right? These kind of forms which are so destructive. There is this story of the African poet, Maya Angelou, who, as a child, she was raped. And when she came back after being raped as a child by this man, she went and told her grandmother, and the grandmother told the men of the house. Then the men of the house went and murdered him. And she found out the next morning that her rapist had been murdered. This is the second wave. They went for the perpetrator and they murdered him because of what happened to her. So she stopped talking completely. She was completely mute for 5-6 years. So this didn't have to happen, because what was really needed, if the sexual sense was really awake from that unconditional place, that place of a sexual quality of power, would be to connect with that power inside that child and to let that child begin to recover from the inside out. It didn't help her at all to go and kill the guy. But that's where we're at. On top of rape comes murder. And that should help the victims. Rather than letting the victim feel the violation completely of what's happened and feel her own strength behind that.
And then the other way around, just push the child away, the girl, the
Yeah.
female.
Yeah.
We're no longer in the family.
Yeah, also.
It's the other way around.
Yeah.
Or,
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. The way our energy goes in sexuality.
Yeah. Yeah.
Decide not to put together, I guess. But it's the kind of norm to not allowing you or
Exactly.
it's almost same murder.
Yes. So if sexuality is all about doing, then you do something to the one that did something sexually,
Yeah.
and there is no addressing this place of pure violation, this place of horror, this place of having the collective abuse dumped upon a child. You know, this was an African American, so there's a whole slavery thing going on there, a whole transmission in that movement. There's no space for any of that. It's just a crime on a crime on a crime. She found her own way back from that experience. But basically, it's another example of the outside and the inside, because she stopped talking completely, and started reading poetry. And one of the greatest poets of our century was born out of that experience. When she started to talk again, she was the best orator ever, because she'd opened up the inner voice. Same principle. Which doesn't mean it was great that she was raped, but there is this incredible power within our creative existence, which we so often miss. And then we're delivering trauma upon trauma upon trauma upon trauma. And it's the same when we're working with people who are raped. We get to the first layer and we try and fix it there without getting to the core, where the power is. And often that, just as Bart says, the way to that core involves some taboo areas. Opening up the sexual sense again, even though it's extremely pleasant what's being tasted, what's being felt, what's being experienced.